While I actually believe that the plural of anecdote is not data, I think that it can be. And I think that the idea of anecdote is really different than systematic qualitative research, which has actually been conducted in universities around the world for decades. Really, where I come at this is as a qualitative researcher by training. When I was in graduate school, I was out there conducting interviews, gathering stories, and then collecting that systematically over time, transcribing and synthesizing that information. And there really are practices that the field has used to do that over time. The old school ways of collecting the data included interviews, observations, free response items on a survey where people just write what they're thinking, or ethnography, where you really kind of move into a place and you stay there and you go native and you collect information that way. Some of us really were trained in these methods, and they're still relevant today. It's just that we have a lot of new ways to do the same type of thing much more efficiently. Of course, videography and digital storytelling are also methods that are out there today. We've heard obviously a lot about that today. With videography, we've actually come to the belief that videography is a fantastic data collection tool when you're never going to edit it, and it's a fantastic reporting tool when you know the case studies you want, the stories you want to tell. And you've reached those stories not because it's the ones that make you feel the best or cry the most, but because they're the ones that really explain how the intervention happened, why it's important, and why it's relevant. Collecting data that's never going to be edited is just what we're doing with Whitney right now with Girls for a Change. It's really difficult to get middle and high school girls to show you that change on a survey. It just doesn't translate to a 1 to 5 scale in the way that you would think it might, or maybe it does for adults, maybe it doesn't even for adults. But we do know, and Girls for a Change staff have told us for years, you can see it. You can see the difference in the girls from when they walk in the door to when they leave. They're different. Well, how are they different? Well, they're holding themselves differently. They're talking differently. Okay, great. Let's videotape that. Let's look at the time 1 and the time 2. But in terms of analysis, I think there are also really important changes. Nowadays, I think we're using different language to talk about patterns, and I think we've evolved in our thinking about patterns. Patterns used to be a lot about critical mass. We can look for where something is happening the most. So most kids in the sample are talking about caring adults being the most important aspect about what makes them help trust a youth development setting. Most adolescents are talking about the skills that they're learning. And in gathering and looking for just the aggregation of information, we've formed a lot of theories about what works in the social sector. I like to think, I hope to think, we're getting a little more analytical about change. I'm not sure that change is always just about aggregation of a good thing. And I think a lot of social change models, even though we love scale, are not necessarily scalable in the way that social change will happen once there's a Girls for a Change everywhere. That may be the most inefficient way to think about scale in social change. So can we think more along the lines of tipping point? Can we think about flywheel effects? Can we think about the key levers and triggers for change? And so in qualitative analysis, rather than simply coding for quantity and just doing the patterns around critical mass, how can we start to design our analysis frameworks so that we're actually catching moments of change or pathways of change, levers of change that are the most important things to identify, and then understanding how the groups we're working with are creating those. I think those are more relevant questions for us today. So unless you invest in the qualitative, you really will have trouble determining which program models are the most effective. Even if you have organization A and B that are strong on the same metric, they're both creating a lot of jobs. And you have organization C and D that are creating slightly fewer jobs. How are you going to tell the difference between A and B and C and D without the deep qualitative? So what we'd like to say is that the metrics tell you whether or not you're having a difference, making a difference, but only the stories can really tell you how. And again, it's not using the stories to brag or say, oh, invest in me or donate now. You can do it for those reasons. But from a qualitative research point of view, the stories explain the best practices. I think we're probably still more towards the quantitative metric side right now, but I just hear a lot of great, robust conversations about stories and about mixed method designs and really looking deeply inside process. So I'm hopeful, and I think we have to think of everybody who cares about making social change as an ally, and just like the sort of red state, blue state debate, it's not productive if we just close our ears to the other side. So there's merit to both.